The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the best-selling Switch games and by far the best-selling Legend of Zelda game. I have played through it in depth at least 4 times and somehow there are still surprises to me in the game. The world is really fun to explore and if you're anything like me, you can't go very far without something catching your attention. Speaking of attention, now that I have yours, let's talk about the people of Hyrule. More specifically, I want to talk about this version of Hyrule from an anthropological perspective. What's that? What's anthropology? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I can explain. To put it in the simplest of terminologies, anthropology is the study of societies, their cultures, and how they developed. There's a wide range of anthropology out there, such as archaeological, physical, and linguistic, but we are going to be looking at the cultural side of anthropology. What exactly is culture? Culture is simply how a group of people live their lives. Culture is definitely created, but is learned over time by a group. This video could easily be 5 hours long if I fully got into terminology, but for simplicity, and the sake of the deadline I have, we are going to be getting into the culture of each of the groups in Hyrule. In our world, anthropologists believe that race is a social construct, but in the game, race is just how they describe the different groups that are present within it. And for the most part, these groups are very different. For those of you who haven't played the game, I'm going to give a little bit of an explanation as we go. But right now, the main part that you need to know is that Zelda is a medieval fantasy world. A majority of the races in-game have a chosen champion who is hand-selected by Princess Zelda to help prevent the apocalypse, but in-game it's called the Calamity. They weren't successful, but they're still important to this video because they have special items that are related to each of the cultures that they come from. For the most part, I'm going to be looking at 3 key traits from each race, and that is food, art, and the history. When it comes to food, each of the races in Hyrule do have their own recipes that are unique to them and the region they come from. The art aspect of this is primarily going to consist of weapons and armors that they have, so that's the best case scenario to look at. And when it comes to history, Breath of the Wild gives us plenty of information to work with, as it takes place the furthest in the Zelda timeline. You got it? Good. Now let's get into it. The races that exist in Hyrule are the Hylians, the Sheikah, the Gorons, the Zora, the Rito, the Gerudo, and the Koroks. Each group exists in their own towns and areas, although they do travel and interact with each other fairly often. There is a commonly held belief in anthropology that we cannot begin to understand each other until we understand ourselves. This makes the Hylians a great place to start, as it is the race the player character, Link, belongs to, so therefore, technically we belong to it as well when we are playing the game. According to mythology, they originally existed in a civilization in the sky before migrating down to the surface at the end of Skyward Sword, the first game in the Zelda timeline. Government structure should also be mentioned, as each game does have a certain structure to each civilization. The name differs from culture to culture, but they do have one specific leader for each race and civilization. Assumedly, this is so the game mechanic of going to talk to each leader for plot reasons is easier to understand for everybody. But for what it's worth, the Hylians refer to their leaders as kings and queens like a typical monarchy. Appearance-wise, the Hylians are relatively diverse. Hylians used to live around the castle of the royal family, but they all kind of got wiped out before the game begins in an apocalypse. So now most of them live in a rural agricultural area known as Hateno Village. Their clothing is colorful and has a Nordic aesthetic, although to the people in-game it's probably just called the Hylian aesthetic. The Hylians actually used to have a military with different ranks of soldiers, and that difference is displayed in the weapons they use. The higher the rank, the more adorned the weapons are. The ranks or tiers of weapons are Traveler, which is more used by the everyday person, Soldier, Knight, Royal Guard, and Royal. The weapons of the Royal and Royal Guards actually have the Hylian crest in their designs. When compared to the amount of weapons the other civilizations have, the Hylians are by far the most diverse, with there being 6 total different tiers of weapons. Interestingly enough, the Hylians are seen to be the least magically inclined out of all of them if we exclude Princess Zelda. That fact could also explain why they have so many different types of weapons. They might be trying to make up for what they lack in magic with physical weapons. This could also explain why they have so many different types of weapons. Perhaps they're trying to make up for what they lack in magic with physical weapons. The Hylian champion is Link, who is also our player character. Interestingly enough, Link does not have a divine beast like the other champions do, but instead, he has the Master Sword, which I also have one of, which in-game is considered to be a mythological weapon and potentially just a myth. Now, obviously, it's not a myth, as Link uses it in-game, but culturally among the Hylians and the other races, the Master Sword is this mythological weapon that might not exist. In addition to the Master Sword, in Breath of the Wild, Link is commonly shown wearing his royal blue champion's tunic. This tunic is very similar in design to that of the normal Hylian tunics we get to see in the game. There are also certain dishes that are specific to the Hylians. Those are mushroom risotto, salmon risotto, poultry pilaf, egg pudding, and any dish containing fresh milk and Hateno cheese. So what makes these dishes specific to the Hylians? They contain ingredients that are found in the regions that the Hylians now reside in, or are specifically titled with Hylian in the item description. Those items specifically happen to be Hylian rice, Hylian mushrooms, Hateno cheese, and fresh milk. With the Hylians done, let's take a look at the Sheikah. The Sheikah are tied pretty heavily to the Hylians, with the two typically working hand in hand with each other. In other games, it could be argued that the Sheikah are more so a group of Hylians, but in Breath of the Wild, they are specifically a different race from them. The leader of the Sheikah is referred to as the chief, and their aesthetic is heavily tied to Asian culture. Their clothing is very heavy on grays, purples, and reds. The Sheikah are also notable for their white hair, being a genetic trait instead of something gained by age. They are also said to be rather technologically advanced, especially when compared to the other races of Hyrule. Their weapons and armor are very uniformed and sleek, designed for stealth. There's a fun little fact in the art book of Breath of the Wild that claims that the metal used for the hilts of the Sheikah weapons are specifically from the Gorons. The Sheikah themselves do not have a champion, but they do still play a critical role in trying to defeat the Calamity as their technology is widely used. The divine beasts themselves in the past were created by the Sheikah, however, to be piloted by somebody of each race. They also created the Sheikah slate that both Link and Zelda use in-game. The armor that Link can wear from the Sheikah is the Stealth Set, which features those purple, grays, and reds that the Sheikah are commonly associated with. It also has the emblem of the race on its shin guards and chest, that being a singular eye. It can also be argued that the guardian weapons you can get in the game belong to the Sheikah as well. This is due to the fact that the ones who created it and the only people you can get it from are both Sheikah. The dishes that are commonly associated with the Sheikah are buttered apples, tasty veggie cream soup, puff meat stuffed pumpkin, and Mother's Honeyed Apple, which a little Sheikah girl teaches you the recipe for at the end of a questline. What makes these dishes specific to the Sheikah are once again the ingredients they used, this time being swift carrots and fortified pumpkins. The hot buttered apples can also be considered theirs as well because of their relation to the questline that has you getting the Mother's Honeyed Apple. The Rito are a race of bipedal bird people, and according to history and mythology, they share a common ancestor with the Zora. As such, they are able to fly. Just like the Sheikah, their leader is referred to as the chief. To contrast the birds that we know, the Rito live in the colder regions of Hyrule. This, however, is not an issue as their feathers keep them warm. Interestingly enough, their culture has a tradition of developing expert archers and skilled singers. As a result, most of their weapons consist of bows for archery. The other weapons they have resemble the shape of arrowheads. Their clothing consists of light cloths and feathered accessories, commonly having a color palette of reds, whites, greens, and browns. When it comes to what Link can wear from the Rito, we get the Snow Quill set, a cloth armor set that resists the cold of the region and is lined with the molted feathers of the Rito. The headpiece for this set even mimics the braids that one would find in the feathers of an adult Rito male. The champion of the Rito is Revali. The most notable addition to his Rito attire is the royal blue scarf that he adorns around his neck. There's a matching bit of fabric on his bow, the Great Eagle Bow. He also still has red marks on his cheeks, which signifies that he's still rather young. These are marks that the Rito children have and carry into full maturity. Meals that are specific to the Rito are apple pie, nut fruit cake, fried bananas, fish pie, seafood rice balls, and salmon manure, which you learn about through a quest in the village involving some Rito children doing some cooking. For the most part, what makes these specific to the Rito is the inclusion of Tabantha wheat, which can be found by foraging in the region around Rito Village. The Breath of the Wild art book describes the Gorons far better than I could ever hope to, so I'm just going to read it straight out of here. By the way, this book is so useful for this. I did most of my research from this, and it's straight from the developers. Culture is created, and so were these races, so it's a great source. And it describes them as good folks with big boulder-like bodies. Gorons possess massive, powerful stone-like bodies and call the side of Death Mountain home. They boast superior strength and can withstand the blazing heat of piping hot magma, but most are fairly laid-back individuals. They can curl into a ball and roll in order to get around, protecting their faces with their large arms and hands. I could not have described them better if I tried, and I tried. Gorons have white hair and brown patches on their back that look very similar to that of rock. Their culture holds a high belief of hard work and relaxation, most of their jobs being that of mining. Their leader also goes by the title of chief, so really maybe it's just the Hylians that are different at this point. Their clothing consists of loincloths, as they live on Death Mountain, which is an active volcano in case you didn't know. It's pretty hot there. There are also hot springs on the mountain near Goron Village that are very popular tourist attractions. But that begs the question, if it's a tourist spot, how do non-Gorons survive the heat of Death Mountain? I'm glad you asked, because this segues nicely into our What Can Link Wear section. The answer for this one is simple, the Flamebreaker set. This is an armor set that is primarily made of stone. It's made by Goron craftsmen to protect Hylian tourists from the heat of Goron City and Death Mountain. When it comes to colors, it is primarily gray, brown, and red. The Gorons don't really have a need for weapons, as not only are they strong on their own, but they're pretty laid back in general. However, they still do exist in the form of gear that is typically used for mining alongside combat. The Goron champion, Daruk, uses one of these alongside his hands in combat. In terms of appearance, Daruk himself has a full white beard and a royal blue sash that wraps around his torso. As mentioned a second ago, when it comes to weapons other than his hands, he uses the Boulder Breaker. Other than Link, Daruk is actually my favorite of the champions. Gorons are actually in a really interesting position when it comes to the culinary section of this breakdown, because their diet consists mostly of rocks and minerals. These guys eat rocks. However, they also do eat a variety of curries and spiced meats. What makes these specific to the Gorons is the spice used, fittingly titled Goron Spice. It is also definitely worth mentioning that there's a dish called the Rock Roast, which can be found within the mines of Death Mountain. In Goron City, we get to learn about this because there is a quest where Link gets to help bring it out of the mines for somebody. It is not edible by Link in Breath of the Wild, but in a prequel to the game, we can see him trying to eat it. The Gorons are very skilled craftsmen, and this has been consistent throughout the whole series.
My favorite, prime rock roast. Doesn't it look delicious? Why don't you dig in, little guy?
The Gorons are very skilled craftsmen, and this has been consistent throughout the whole series. However, there is one aspect that I want to point out as we are talking about them. Back in Ocarina of Time, the Gorons were skilled craftsmen, but instead made items that were seemingly more geared specifically towards Hylian use. This is especially true in the case of the Giant's Knife, which you can purchase from a blacksmith in the game, which breaks after a few swings. Eventually, you can upgrade to the Big Goron Sword from the blacksmith's older brother, which doesn't break. In Breath of the Wild, the gear that Link can purchase to survive the high temperatures also seems less Hylian culture aesthetics and more specific to the Gorons, despite the fact that it is made for Hylians. In Ocarina of Time, we had the Goron Tunic, which was just a red recolor of Link's normal outfit in that game. And now, in Breath of the Wild, we have the Flamebreaker armor set. Now, this could just be a case of game design, but I personally like to view this as a cultural development of the Gorons. In Ocarina of Time, the Gorons were hardly as developed or active as they are in Breath of the Wild. Perhaps this shift of making weapons that are easily identifiable in visual appearance as Goron made is indicative of that. This could be very intentional, and I'm just now realizing it, or it could just be a happy coincidence. Either way, it's pretty cool. The Zora are an aquatic race who have fish-like fins and brightly colored scales. As such, they are great at water-based activities like swimming and can actually effortlessly scale waterfalls. The leader is referred to as a king, and there's actually a royal family just like with the Hylians. For the most part, there isn't much that the Zora wear in regards to clothing. In fact, it mostly consists of silver jewelry that adorns their neck, waist, ankles, and wrists. I have to address it. It's a different day. I had to go to class. We got a different outfit. I can't control the sun, so this is looking a little different as well. From a real-world perspective, the artists note that in order to make the Zora look cool, they took inspiration from aquatic creatures like sharks and dolphins. The Zora are unique from the other races in Hyrule in the fact that they are very long-lived. In fact, despite the calamity taking place over 100 years ago, most of the Zora that are still alive when we're in the game still remember it happening. It's still a very fresh wound to them. When it comes to weapons, the Zora primarily use spears, which makes them rather effective in combat in the water. They also do have swords, bows, and shields, though. In all of their weapons, there's a hook motif, which is most likely a reference to the fact that they are indeed fish people. The main color of the weapons and accessories they have is silver. We actually even know a bit about the Zora courtship process for marriage. But before we get into that, we need to talk about the Zora champion, Princess Mipha. She wears a royal blue sash to signify herself as a champion, and she even has some royal headpieces in her design. She wields the light scale trident. Now we can get into those courtship details. Princess Mipha and Link were actually very close in the history of the game, having known each other for quite a while. Princess Mipha is also very fond of Link, going as far to have the Zora set of armor created for Link himself. When I say for Link, I do not mean in the same way that the other races have their armor sets created for Hylians. In the art book of the game, this armor set is accompanied by this description. Each generation's Zora princess painstakingly crafts armor for their future husband. It's been said that it's crafted using dragon scales. Since the armor set fits Link perfectly, and we know who the Zora princess at the time was, it's implied that Princess Mipha created it with the intention of giving it to Link as a proposal. The armor set itself features scales, silver adornments like the Zora wear, all over a blue bodysuit and a headpiece mimicking that of the Zora. This piece shows that in the culture of Hyrule, it was perfectly normal for members of different races to get married. It's an armor piece that also tells a tragic love story as Princess Mipha was killed before she could give it to Link, although Link would survive and lead us into Breath of the Wild, where we learn about this in retrospect. As to be expected, the culinary diets of the Zora primarily consist of aquatic creatures. This is primarily what makes something a Zora dish, and that list is far longer than the others. However, 3 honorable mentions are salmon risotto, crab risotto, and hearty clam chowder. The Gerudo are quite the opposite of the Zora, living in the Gerudo Desert. The Gerudo themselves are a race composed entirely of women. Despite living in a scorching desert, they have managed to build a prosperous settlement. Physicality-wise, they have red hair and brown skin, while being significantly taller than both Hylian and Sheikah women. They also typically have a far more muscular build than the other 2 humanoids. The Gerudo also even have their own unique language that has developed over time. Women in the Gerudo language are referred to as Vi, and men are referred to as Vo, with Vasak being a common greeting among the Gerudo. Despite the isolatory lifestyle they live in, once they're of age, the Gerudo will move out and across Hyrule to look for a mate or a husband. Fun little fact about the lore, the Gerudo have a birth rate of 99.9% female and 0.1% male. Due to their lack of experience talking to the other sex, we can actually find them having cultural dating lessons in town. These actually can be attended by Link while you are there. Another cultural aspect of the Gerudo is that they have a strict no-vo or men policy within the city walls. The leader of the Gerudo is also referred to as the chief. When it comes to attire, the Gerudo wear very airy and open outfits consisting of a top piece, surwal pants, sandals or heels, and gold accessories to, as the art book describes them, highlight their feminine features. As a culture of warriors, the Gerudo have a lot of weapons. Just like with the Hylians, it can also be said that the type of weapon determines their rank. Instead of swords, they have scimitars with intricate designs on them, growing more and more gold as you move up. The same is true for the shields. In terms of rank, it goes Gerudo Scimitar, which is the most common one used by travelers, Moonlit Scimitar, and finally the Scimitar of the Seven. The Seven themselves are ancient heroes in Gerudo mythology. They are also seen as divine protectors in their belief system. Speaking of their beliefs, Gerudo have a mythology where only one Gerudo male is born every approximately 100 years. When the Gerudo male grows up, he is then said to be the king of the Gerudo for that time period. Within the Zelda timeline, the Gerudo and Hylians have had a very strained relationship at times. However, at the moment, they have a good relationship with them. In fact, the Queen of Hyrule and the Gerudo chief Urbosa were said to be good friends. This goes as far as Urbosa actually taking a motherly role towards Princess Zelda after her own mother passed away. Urbosa would also go on to become the Gerudo champion. She is adorned in a royal blue skirt accented with gold instead of white like we've seen in the other champion garbs. She wields the Scimitar of the Seven and the Daybreaker Shield, a rank of significance. As for the clothing that Link can wear, there are 2 versions. One is the Gerudo set that disguises him as a Hylian Vi, or Hylian woman, with the ability to resist the heat during the day, accompanied by a headpiece to cover his face. The other is obtained from the Gerudo Secret Club, which has an exclusive entry list. This is the Desert Vo set, and is only meant for a Vo or a man to wear. Now, it could be speculated that this is either for the Gerudo husbands to wear, or potentially that one elusive male-born Gerudo to wear. Wearing this set, however, will not grant Link entry into Gerudo Town. Wearing this set, however, will still not allow Link to enter Gerudo Town without wearing a disguise. As you can imagine, the food choices in the desert are very limited, so the Gerudo get most of their food from trading with other civilizations around Hyrule. Despite that fact, the Gerudo still do have a few cultural dishes that can be made using the fruits from the desert. Interestingly enough, the Gerudo have found a way to create and maintain ice for food preservation. The dishes that are found in Gerudo Town are creamy hearty soup, seared steak, hearty simmered fruit. Other than that, it's primarily mushroom-based dishes or any of the various fruits found around the deserts. Those fruits, however, do make a dish very distinctly to the Gerudo, though. And these fruits are hydromelons, volt fruit, Gorons, and wild berries. The Gerudo are also the only race to have drinks which are served in a bar. The most noted of these is a Noble Pursuit, and it is assumed to be alcoholic. The Koroks are a very interesting race to discuss in the context of this. They are much less a race of people, but more so mystical spirits of the forest. They come in all shapes and sizes, donned in leaf-shaped wooden masks while still resembling trees themselves. They even have a supposed leader, referring to them little more as the Elder Korok. The Koroks are also speculated to be descended from the Kokiri, the children of the forest who are primarily seen in Ocarina of Time, much earlier in the timeline once again. Link can encounter the Koroks hiding all across the map, with them referring to him as Mr. Hero, who they are expecting to return for the legendary Master Sword that awaits Link in the Korok Forest. It is noted that no one other than the Koroks can enter the forest unless they possess certain qualities of a hero. Due to being spirits of the forest, the Koroks do not need to eat or sleep in the same way that Link or anyone else in Hyrule does. Yet, there are plentiful provisions and even beds made up for Link when he does arrive in their forest. Unlike the rest of the Hyruleans, with the exception of Princess Zelda, the Koroks are the only ones to know that Link will someday return, so they are prepared to be ready for when he does. They even have weapons made out of wood that Link can take with him and use if he isn't quite ready to reclaim the Master Sword quite yet. Despite there being an elder, there's also the Great Deku Tree, the spirit of the forest itself. The Great Deku Tree is like a father to the Koroks, making the Elder Korok more so of an older sibling instead of a leader. In addition to their preparations, the Koroks also created trials, which are designed to make Link even stronger than he is now. According to mythology, the Korok can only be seen by the pure of heart. This guarantees that no evil can make its way to claim the Master Sword before Link can. The importance of Link in-game going across Hyrule to meet and learn from each of the races is to unify Hyrule against the threat of another calamity, and with their help, the final battle is significantly easier. The other races seem really strange in concept at first, almost completely foreign to Link. Yet, through the process of helping them out before they are able to aid Link, we learn a lot more about them. These once seemingly different cultures become comfortable to us, and we realize they're really no different than us. They even begin to accept Link into their own culture by the end of the questline. Link learns something from each of them, and in turn, they learn from him. Whether it's a cowardly Goron learning to find courage by watching Link, and in return giving him more defenses through Daruk's protection, or healing century-long wounds within the Zora tribe after Princess Mipha's demise, only for her healing grace ability to be instilled within Link. Yes, the champion abilities are game mechanics and abilities, but metaphorically it can be interpreted as Link learning something from each of these cultures, which then helps him on his journey. At the beginning of the game, Link awakens with no memories of the past, but by getting to know those around him again, he regains a sense of the world and himself, growing in strength in the process, both physically through the health bar increase, and spiritually by reconnecting with who he is.
May I ask, do you really remember me?
Maybe, just maybe, this is a lesson we can learn from the silent hero of Hyrule and carry it into our daily lives. But by getting to know those who are different from you and widening your worldview in the process through the same analysis that we did here today with the fictional races of Hyrule, you can make the world a little bit better in the process. Life is hard, but just like the final battle, it's easier when we all come together. Understanding someone who is totally different than you might seem like a much longer process than any of the quest lines in the game, but it's infinitely more rewarding than any of the max tier weapons that any of the groups in game can give you. That's all I have. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new in the process. Let me know what your favorite fact about any of the groups we talked about today was. Personally, I found the connection I made between the Gorons of Ocarina of Time and the Gorons of Breath of the Wild to be really fascinating, even if it might have been unintentional on Nintendo's behalf. But hey, Nintendo said that the story and lore are up to the player's imagination, even if there are concrete connections that they themselves put into place. The Zelda timeline is a very messy beast of its own creation, but I'm also really down to talk about it sometime, as I have my own thoughts and opinions on it. Definitely let me know if that's something you would be interested in. I also found the Breath of the Wild art book to be really useful when I was doing the research for this. I actually bought this originally just to look at the pretty art that's inside it, but hey, this just goes to further prove that you never really know where you're going to learn something new from, whether that's a text blob that you never meant to read or someone you've never talked to before. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I've been Brett, you've been you, and this has been a breakdown of the Zelda race from an anthropological perspective. That's all I have. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and bye.